Section 17 of Anthropology. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Anthropology, Book 1, by Immanuel Kant. Translated by Adolf Ernst Kroger. Section 17. B. Concerning the faculty of prevision. Previsio. 33. It is of more interest to possess this faculty than any other, since it is the condition which determines all possible practical acting, and all the objects to which man relates the use of his powers. All our powers turn upon a dubious or certain prevision of what our powers are able to accomplish. We look back into the past, remember, only with a view to make possible thereby our looking into the future, looking around as we do from our standpoint of the present, in a general way in order to resolve upon or prepare ourselves for something. Empirical prevision is the expectation of similar occurrences, expectatio casuum similium, and requires no intellectual knowledge of causes and effects, but merely a memory of observed occurrences as they usually follow each other, and repeated experience in these matters produces an aptness in this memorizing. It is a matter of great interest to a seaman and a farmer how the wind and weather may turn, but our prevision in this respect does not reach much farther than the Common Almanac, the prophecies whereof we praise when they are fulfilled, and forget when they do not come to pass, and which thus always retain some consideration anyway. One might almost believe that Providence had purposely arranged the change of weather in so inscrutable a manner, in order that man might not find it too easy to make proper arrangements for every occasion in his life, but be compelled to use his reason in order to be prepared for every occurrence. To live thoughtlessly from day to day does not confer much honor upon man's understanding, it is true, as in the case of the Caribbee Island Indian, who sells his hammock at mornings, and is astonished in the evening to find that he does not know how to sleep through the night. But, provided that it involves no offense against morality, we may well consider a person who is hardened against all the events of life happier than one who kills all delight in life by constantly entertaining gloomy views. Of all prospects which a man may look for, the most comfortable one is probably a moral condition which gives him reason to believe in its permanence and a further advance towards improvement. But if, although courageously resolved to lead hereafter a new and a better mode of life, he is forced to say to himself, I suppose it will not amount to anything after all, because he has so often made the same sort of a promise to himself, but always broken it under the plea of an exception for that one accepted time, then he is certainly in a disconsolate condition, arising from the constant expectation of the same results. But where the future depends upon the fate that hangs over us, and not on the use of our own free will, this looking ahead is either a presentiment, presentio, or pre-expectation, praesagitio. The former suggests, as it were, an occult sense for the perception of what has not yet become present; the latter, a consciousness of the future, derived from reflection on the law of causality in the sequence of events. One sees clearly that all presentiments are brain spectres, for how can we feel that which as yet is not? But if they are judgments based upon dim conceptions of such a casual relation, then they are not presentiments, since we can discover the conceptions which lead to them, and explain the grounds of those judgments. Presentiments are generally of the painful kind, A feeling of dread, which arises from physical causes, precedes with an uncertainty as to the cause of the dread. But there are also presentiments of a joyful and bold kind, indulged in by enthusiasts who scent the approaching unveiling of a mystery, for which man nevertheless has no receptive sense, and who believe that they see with their eyes just newly uncovered the presentiment of that which they, as seers, expect in mystic contemplation. The second sight of the Scottish Highlanders, with which some of them believe they see a person hung up on the ship mast, whose death they then, as soon as their ship reaches shore, pretend to have been just advised, belongs to the same class of enchantments. C. Concerning the gift of prophecy, facultas divinatrix. 34. To foretell, to divine the future, and to prophesy are distinguished in this, that the first is a prevision, according to laws of experience, and hence natural; the second, opposed to the known laws of experience, and hence unnatural; while the third is an inspiration by means of a cause distinct from nature, or held to be so distinct and hence supernatural. Therefore the latter gift, seeming as it does to originate from the influence of a God, is also called the real faculty of divination, for it is wrong to call every clever anticipation of the future a divination. If we say of someone, he prophesies this or that, this may indicate a very natural talent. But if, in doing so, he pretends to be supernaturally inspired, we ought to say of him, he is a fortune teller, as in the case of the gypsies, who call palmistry reading the planets, or of the astrologers and treasure hunters, with whom we may also class the gold makers, supreme over all of whom ranked in ancient times Pythia, rank in our day the ragged Siberian shaman. The prophetic utterances of the auspices and haruspices of the Romans had in view not so much the discovery of what lies concealed in the future of the world's events as the will of the gods, to which their religion taught them to submit. But how the poets came also to consider themselves inspired or possessed, and prophets (vates), and to boast of receiving inspiration in their poetical moods (furor poeticus), can be explained only by the fact that the poet does not execute his work at leisure, like a prose writer or orator, but must wait for a favorable moment, when happy thoughts and images crowd upon him of their own accord, as it were, he remaining in a manner passive. And indeed it is an old saying, that a certain dose of madness is always applied to genius. This explains also the faith in oracles, which people believed were to be found in passages chosen at random from the works of celebrated poets, who were impelled by inspiration to say, sortis Virgilians, a means of discovering the will of heaven similar to that of modern pietists, who use their devotional books for the same purpose, and also in the interpretation of the Sibylline books, which are said to have foretold the Romans the fate of their state, in which they unfortunately lost, partly owing to misapplied economy. All prophecies that foretell the unavoidable fate of a nation, which nevertheless is held to arise from its own fault, and therefore produced by its free will, are not only useless, the presupposition being that the fate cannot be escaped, but also absurd, since in their unconditioned destiny, discretum absolutum, they postulate a mechanism of freedom, the conception whereof contradicts itself. Probably the height of absurdity or deception in prophecy was reached when a lunatic was regarded as a seer of invisible things, as though a spirit had taken the place of his soul, which for that time had absented itself from its home in his body, and was speaking through him, whereupon the poor soul invalid, or perhaps a mere epileptic, was taken for an energumenon, possessed, and if the demon was regarded as one of the good-natured kind, he was called by the Greeks amantes, and his interpreter a prophet. Every kind of stupidity has been exhausted in order to bring within our reach the future, the prevision whereof so much interests us, mere skipping all the steps that might lead us to its cognition by the way of the understanding and experience. O curus hominum! No prophesying science is so certain, and yet so far-reaching as that of astronomy, which predicts the revolutions of the heavenly bodies in infinity. But even this was not sufficient to prevent the accession of a mysticism, which did not make dependent, as reason demands, the numbers of the world epochs from events, but on the contrary made events dependent upon certain numbers, and thus turned chronology itself, so necessary a condition of history, into a fable. Section 17.